Stocks have risen, there's no doubt. But once we look at this without any bias, we can see that there has been manipulation. We know what the central banks have been up to. Tech stocks specifically have been the #1 seller for foreign central banks, including the Swiss National Bank. As a result, an unfair advantage has become apparent. But no worries, everything is going to be just fine. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Can you guess which stock this is? Well, it's Netflix. That's right, Netflix has accelerated beyond a PE ratio of 100. Now, of course, this is not the only stock which has a PE ratio of 100, but the reason that I mention this, that I think it is so critical, is that I talked about this in my first book. And what I said was that we had the tech boom and bust, and many stocks were at a PE ratio of over 100. I talked about how historically the PE ratio was approximately 16, and this is something that goes back all the way to the 1800s. And then you look at these stocks in this particular time frame of the tech boom and bust, and many of them have gone over 100, and that was astronomical. And then we saw the stock market crash considerably. You saw the NASDAQ not coming back up to its previous highs for so many years following that. And now today we see Netflix hitting a PE ratio of 100. This is just one indicator. It is simply one indicator of many. Many believe that it is one of the primary indicators. However, it's just one. So we'll take a look at another one. I just wanted to mention the fact that central banks have selectively purchased shares of particular companies. Now, where do those central banks get their money? It's like you and I. A central bank has to go to work, 9-to-5 job, save their money, and then they invest it? Or wait a second, do they just print up the money out of thin air and decide that they'll buy some Apple, they'll buy some Netflix, and they'll perhaps leave out certain companies? So certain companies get that unfair advantage, but others get the short end of the stick. So they never receive the advantages of all the money printing. I never received any money from all this money printing. I don't know about you, maybe you did, but I certainly didn't. So let's look at another indicator here. And you can see the Netflix non-GAAP free cash flow. So this here, GAAP, is the generally accepted accounting principles. And the free cash flow over this time frame, over the past few years now, has been terrible for Netflix. Not only is it in the negative, but it continues to get worse. And that isn't a good sign, yet the stock continues to rise. Again, it's only one indicator, but now we're showing that two indicators, plus the fact that if these central banks are buying up the shares, what would happen if all of a sudden the central banks weren't buying these shares? Does it still deserve the price that it's at today? Or is it simply investors, hedge funds, algorithms riding the wave of all this central bank manipulation? You be the judge of that. Now look at this. The ECB's balance sheet has risen considerably as well. And you can see that despite the talk of this tapering, I've seen nothing to that, BS talk. This is since 2015, it has continued to increase. In fact, it has gone beyond the fraudulent government of Japan's GDP. Look at that. A central bank has printed so much money that on its balance sheet, it's more than a country's GDP. That is extreme. That should be sending off warning signals that there is too much money being printed by these central banks. But of course, not going to happen. A lot of this money gets put into, whether it's buying up toxic debt, whether it's buying up the debt of corporations as the ECB is doing right now. Maybe they're buying out stocks directly. Each central bank has their own sort of program. The fact is that how long can this go on for? Is it perpetual, as they said in 1929? Maybe. But then again, those people in 1929 seem to, realize what was happening by about 1931 or so. The central bank balance sheets here, as you can see, can you believe it? The Fed isn't the king anymore. The Fed has been keeping it level, whereas the Bank of Japan and the ECB have surpassed that. So no longer does the Fed have that crown on top of its head. It has been knocked out, and the ECB and the Bank of Japan have gone beyond that. Congratulations. Now this here is from a book by Murray Rothberg. I think he's an excellent author. Personally, I've read a couple of his books. Extremely detailed, by the way, if you haven't read any. But he has a very simple writing style. So this is what he wrote. I want to share it with you. I think it's just so telling, and I completely agree. Banking is not a legitimate industry providing legitimate service, so long as it continues to be a system of fractional reserve banking. That is, the fraudulent making of contracts that it is impossible to honor. To me, that is just smacks me right in the face. It's so true, it's so obvious, and yet we're here. We have to live within this environment. The banks own everything. Go to your skyline. Take a look at what all the biggest buildings are. Almost all of them will be banks. They're investment institutions or commercial banks or anything else. And you just see the way it is. They own and control this system at this level. And they manipulate everything. They decide when to bring back that liquidity, to call it in and cause a collapse. And they decide when they want to create a boom. They generate that through central banking, through the creation of fraudulent debt. You and I can't decide that. You and I don't have a say. We can't vote. We can't even know what they're doing. And yet they're in control of this entire system. They created the central banks, those in control of these commercial banks, investment institutions. They created the central banks, and they are manipulating us as a result. The entire monetary system is a fraud. That's why in my second book, I actually make the push that maybe we should do away with it, that we should become self-sufficient. I'm personally sick and tired of all the boom and bust cycles. We're always going to be sort of dealing with it in one way, shape, or form. We have to have a handle on it, most people anyway. And so what will we do? Well, my advice is to become self-sufficient as much as possible. Things like getting solar panels and other things. So that's the solution. Everyone's always asking for the solution. It's hard to do that on every single video. I've talked about it so many times on other videos before. I outline all of that in my books. It's easier in the books because you have many pages and chapters and things that you can outline that, and not just a 10-minute video. So if you found this video informative, please give me a thumbs up. When you give me a thumbs up, it pushes these videos higher up into the YouTube search rankings, so I appreciate that. And last but not least, if you found this video informative, I know you will find my books, The Money GPS, and my new release, Global Economic Collapse, even more informative. So the first book is where I get into the PE ratios. I break down the tech boom and bust. I have a whole chapter on that. Whereas the new book takes on familiar concepts, but I also get into the things like becoming self-sufficient, like earning income, and other things. So you can actually flip through those books at Amazon. There's a link in the description. Take care.